It was a dark and stormy night, and Sarah was driving home from a late shift at work. She had taken a shortcut through the woods to save time, but she soon realized that she had made a grave mistake. As she drove deeper into the woods, the rain grew heavier and the wind picked up. The trees creaked and groaned in the wind, and Sarah felt like she was being watched. Suddenly, she heard a loud thud and her car jolted to a stop. She tried to start the engine, but it wouldn't budge. She got out of the car to investigate, but the rain made it hard to see. As she walked around the car, she noticed that one of the tires had blown out. She cursed under her breath, realizing that she was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Just then, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned around, but no one was there. She shrugged it off as her imagination, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. She took out her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. She tried to start the car again, but it was no use. She was stuck. As she sat in her car, waiting for the rain to stop, she heard a scratching sound on the roof of the car. She looked up and saw a pair of glowing eyes staring back at her. Suddenly, the car shook violently, as if someone was trying to tip it over. Sarah screamed, realizing that she was not alone. She tried to open the car door, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped. The car shook again, and she could hear the sound of claws scratching against the metal. Then, she heard a voice whisper in her ear. "You shouldn't have come here." Sarah's heart raced as she realized that she was being hunted by something in the woods. She closed her eyes and prayed for help, but she knew that no one was coming. Suddenly, the car door opened, and a pair of hands reached in and grabbed her. She screamed and fought back, but it was no use. She was dragged out of the car and into the woods. As she was dragged deeper into the woods, she saw glimpses of the creature that had been stalking her. It was a creature unlike anything she had ever seen before, with glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws. She tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It cornered her, and she knew that her time was up. She closed her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But then, something strange happened. The creature stopped and backed away, as if it had seen something that scared it off. Sarah opened her eyes and saw a figure in the distance, holding a strange object. The figure approached her, and Sarah saw that it was an old man, dressed in tattered clothes. He held out the object, a strange talisman, and told her to hold on to it. "It will protect you," he said, before disappearing into the woods. Sarah clutched the talisman, feeling its power coursing through her veins. The creature had disappeared, and she was safe. She eventually made it back to civilization, but she never forgot the terror of that night. She kept the talisman with her at all times, knowing that she had been lucky to survive. They soon realized that it led to a decrepit old mansion that stood at the edge of the forest. It looked as if it had been abandoned for years, and there were vines and ivy crawling up the walls. The group hesitated for a moment before making their way inside. The inside of the mansion was even more decrepit than the outside. The walls were covered in mold, the floors creaked underfoot, and there was a musty smell in the air. As they made their way through the mansion, they heard strange noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, but they couldn't see anyone around. Suddenly, they heard a piercing scream, and they rushed up the stairs to investigate. They found themselves in a dimly lit room that was covered in cobwebs. In the corner of the room, they saw a figure hunched over something on the ground. As they approached the figure, they realized that it was a woman, and she was covered in blood. She was crying and muttering to herself, and they couldn't make out what she was saying. When they tried to help her, she suddenly lunged at them, her eyes filled with a wild, animalistic rage. They managed to subdue her, and as they looked closer, they realized that the woman was not human. Her eyes were black and soulless, and her skin was cold and clammy to the touch. They realized with horror that they had stumbled upon something beyond their understanding, something ancient and evil that had been lurking in the mansion for centuries. As they tried to make their way out of the mansion, they found that the doors and windows were all sealed shut, and there was no way out. They were trapped with the evil presence in the mansion, and they soon realized that they were not alone. The walls seemed to be closing in on them, and they heard the sounds of creatures moving around them in the darkness. The group knew that they had to find a way out of the mansion before it was too late, but they soon realized that they were no match for the evil that lurked within. They were trapped, helpless, and alone, with no hope of escape. And as the darkness closed in around them, they realized that they were not the first to fall victim to the mansion's evil, and they would not be the last.